and I am in favor of medical marijuana, just not this poorly conceived amendment. The most important message I have for you today is that we already have medical marijuana in Florida today. Charlotte's Web, Senate Bill 1030, was signed into law 4 months ago. It went through an intense legislative process and is now in the implementation stage. Charlotte's Web provides safeguards for the citizens of Florida. It allows medical marijuana treatment for cancer, seizures, and severe muscle spasms. It ensures that physicians have 8 hours of proper training in medical marijuana. It ensures there are no sales to minors, protecting our adolescents from addiction. It ensures that physicians who prescribe this are fully accountable for their actions. Most importantly, it provides for low THC marijuana. THC is a drug that gets you high. However, the non-THC elements of marijuana, like cannabidiol, are the medically therapeutic components. Charlotte's Web allows for administration of oils and vaporizing the product, but not harmful smoking nor edible preparations. Compare this to an atrocious Amendment 2, which does not limit THC content at all. High concentrations of THC is what pot smokers want. This amendment opens a path for abusable and recreational marijuana. Amendment 2 provides immunity from prosecution for any physician who prescribes it, any person who utilizes it, and dispenser as well. So for pure cash, a medical practitioner can write for anyone pretending to have an ailment and not have to answer to the law. By the way, that would be an unscrupulous medical doctor who writes for that person pretending. We've seen pill mills ravage Florida for 6 years. We don't want pot mills. As a physician, I want to make sure that we protect our citizens from bad prescribers who hide under immunity, as well as gutless entrepreneurs out to make money from this amendment. Thank you.
Sheriff Hamel.
Good evening, everybody. Like the doctor said, this medical marijuana, that's a fallacy. This is marijuana for medical purposes. And there is nothing different about this marijuana proposed in this amendment than the marijuana that you can buy off the streets. There is nothing different. There's nothing medical about it. Marijuana in its raw form has no medicinal value. It's the individual chemicals. There are more than 700 chemicals within the marijuana plant. It's those individual chemicals and those combinations thereof that have been found to help certain ailments. They have not been found to cure anything at this time, but they have been found to help certain ailments. Now let me get into a constitutional amendment and let you guys know what you're in for here. Like the doctor said, Charlotte's Web was passed earlier this year by our legislation. It's a state statute, and it's a certain brand of marijuana that will help particular people. I don't necessarily agree with how he did it because we passed medicine through a popular vote. But through legislation, we can control it, like the doctor said. We can tweak it down the road if we need to. We can lessen it up if we need to. With a constitutional amendment, you're pretty much stuck with it. What you have here is a document that is so open with loopholes that it's there for use and abuse, and it will be. A constitutional amendment, we had an editor up in Charlotte County. He did a story on Amendment 9, and that was on classroom sizes that we voted on several years back, and how much money it's cost. He made a good analogy at the end. He stated that if you vote for the wrong politician, you're usually stuck with him for 2 to 4 years. You vote for the wrong constitutional amendment, you're stuck with it for life. And what you're doing here is making a constitutional right to cultivate, sell, and smoke marijuana. That is not good. This is full of loopholes. It will be abused. We've seen it with our pill mills. We've seen it, how it's been done in other states. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Spencer.
Good evening. Very excited to be here. And I'm going to mention a few of the loopholes. And if I can get the chair out of the way. I think Mr. Morgan actually made my point for me. This amendment is not perfect. And if we are going to be looking at changing our Constitution, it darn well better be perfect. Because we know that out of the 23 states that have medical marijuana laws, 17 of them have already had to go back and amend or change the language that they had. and they weren't all constitutional amendments either. I am going to talk about the kids because you know what? Out of all 23 states, we are the first one and the only one to have no age restriction whatsoever. And because this is a constitutional amendment, we now have kids that have a constitutional right, because privacy is written in there as well, to get pot without parental consent, period. The caregiver, or what Mr. Morgan likes to call the scaregiver commercial we have. We are by no means, and it's quite offensive, under any circumstances calling Mr. Jordan or anyone else a drug dealer. That's a legitimate caregiver. Because remember, we do have compassion. Every single one of us does. We have a Florida statute in place that gives you the doctrine of medical necessity, provided you have that documentation when the police come and do a knock and talk at your door. You're not arrested, your plants aren't taken. But what's interesting about compassion is under that statute, you're allowed to cultivate your own medicine. Is it compassionate to write an amendment that actually takes away the Jordans' right to cultivate their own medicine? And then we are concerned about the pill mills. We had a pill mill problem here, now we're going to have pot shops because they didn't have the decency to write in zoning and restriction for this. It's a constitutional amendment. The cities and counties do not have the authorization to make a regulation or restriction in their county and city because they will be sued by would-be pot shop owners and patients that are saying, you have stopped me from reasonable access to my medication and owning a business. Keep it to the side.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, now we'll go right to the questions. And I'm sorry for jumping the gun earlier. Here we go. Has anyone died of marijuana use as they have with tobacco and alcohol? Dr. Dage.
Well, on the surface, marijuana is a very safe drug. When you compare it to narcotics such as OxyContin, which in high dose are lethal, it turns out from a cardiovascular standpoint, marijuana is very safe. But the question is, what does it do from a psychological standpoint? Can it lead to addiction? Absolutely. You know, there's 3 drugs that are gateway drugs, and that's tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana. All people who are drug addicts have gone through that route. So it's an entrance way. Now, the question is, have people died from it? Well, it certainly destroyed families and certainly led to suicides from drug addiction. But specifically, I'm aware of 2 cases where edibles, which are in this amendment, have led to deaths. One was someone who ingested an edible and thought he could fly and jumped off a balcony. And then there's another person who actually shot his wife when she was calling 911 after edibles. So edibles can be extremely dangerous. You cannot control the amount of medicine that is taken. People tend to eat the whole thing when they're not supposed to. So yes, it has led to deaths. I'm sure there are, and plus, it impairs your coordination, and the amount of driving accidents has gone up in states where medical marijuana has been passed, and likely there have been traffic fatalities, though I can't provide any specifics, but the traffic accidents have certainly gone up.
Well, look, nobody's ever died from marijuana, but somebody has died in your clinic when you shot them up with the kyphoplasty. You remember that, doctor? Someone did die in his clinic when they went there for injection. They went in alive and they didn't come out. When you read his informed consent, and believe me, he makes a lot of money in this business shooting people up with drugs and injections and trigger points. Here are some of the risks when you go to this. This is his consent form.
Mr. Morgan, please.
This is out of line. Let us address Amendment 2 and not personal attacks.
We're addressing who has died from marijuana. Nobody's died from marijuana, but somebody's died in your clinic.
Don't do personal attacks against me.
Okay,
this
well,
is really low. Let's stick to the forum and let's address the question.
Let me just tell you this, sir. These are some of the risks when they go to use. See, this is your language. Seizure, collapse of lung, heart attack, paralysis,
these are medical procedures we
breathing,
do, and all medical
the
procedures
question
have
on the floor
risks.
is, has anyone died of medical marijuana? The answer is no. Has
Stick
anyone,
to the question.
You're not answering the
I am
question,
answering the
and this is not appropriate you to attack me personally.
I'm not attacking you personally. It was one of your
You are
partners.
attacking me personally.
Well, then go get the injection.
I think we should move on.
Go get the injection. Go get the injection.
I have to ask the panelists, please, to refrain from personally attacking one another, please.
I don't know that's a personal attack, it's a fact.
Be professional.
I know that came as a shock, but it's the truth.
Let's move on, please. This one is for Sheriff Bill Promell from Mike Genoki. Sheriff Promell, in all your years being a cop, have you ever had to arrest any pot smokers just under the influence of pot for any violent crime? The same question as well for driving under the influence of pot.
Through my career, I've been in law enforcement 22, 23 years now, and through that time, yes, I have arrested people that were under the influence of other things than alcohol. As the doctor said, these states that have legalized marijuana, they have seen drastic increases in their traffic crashes and their fatalities. I have arrested plenty of people who have been under the influence. I can't tell you how many. It's been a long career. But just to kind of add on that earlier question, in the February edition of the Forensic Science International, they reported 2 deaths of 2 young men ages 23 and 28 after they ingested marijuana.
Synthetic marijuana. There's a difference. There's marijuana, and there's synthetic marijuana. You're referring to synthetic marijuana. The medical marijuana that we're talking about here today, folks, will not be synthetic, so that may alleviate some of your worries.
Well, that article didn't say synthetic.
Well, that's what it is. You got to read.
And there's nothing medical about
If the audience can please refrain from outbursts, that would be really great. Thank you.
I'm trying.
Here's the next one. Mr. Morgan, isn't it true that the Department of Health will make the rules for the amendment just like they made the rules for Charlotte's Web?
That's why we say things like, look, let the health department regulate. Remember this, the alternative that we're talking about is OxyContin. The sheriff talks about deaths. 16,000 people die every year from OxyContin. Hundreds of thousands of kids are hooked. Adults are hooked, including Rush Limbaugh, who got hooked on it. And millions of family members are destroyed. That's the alternative for Dr. Dagan's injection center. That's what we're talking about. Those are the choices on the table. I'm going to tell you something, folks. If it's my child, if it's me, it's not going to be OxyContin ever. And when they talk about, worry about kids going to get prescribed medical marijuana, have any of you ever in your life had your child leave the house on a bicycle or tricycle, go to the doctor's office, present themselves to the doctor without you being there, and the doctor go, oh yeah, here, by the way, go get yourself some medical marijuana. That's what she wants us to believe. Has your child ever gone to the doctor by themselves in their life? And if they haven't, everything she said is wiped away.
Yes, sir.
That's going to be the trick when you go up to Tallahassee and you try and pass legislation. Because no rule, regulation, county ordinance, or state statute can be more restrictive than a constitutional amendment. So you can turn around and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, until somebody, like an attorney, challenges you in court that it's a violation of my constitutional rights, and it gets thrown out. There are too many unknowns. Too many unknowns. This is very poorly written. And like I stated before, it's open for use and abuse, and that's what we're going to see. I do agree that OxyContin was horrible. And it's still horrible, you're absolutely right. And the pill mills were out of control, but we did a good job working with our state and local representatives, and we got it under control. All we're doing here is we're replacing one drug with another. That's not what we need here in Florida. There's a right way to do this. Let's do it the right way. Let's do it the right way.